You know, there's been a lot of articles that have come out about this present generation of young people in their 20s and 30s, the millennials. You know, Time magazine, in one of their special features, called this generation the me generation. A whole generation that thinks of nothing but themselves. They want everything to revolve around me. It's been said that more and more millennials are afflicted with narcissistic disorder. It's as if there's this whole generation of young people who have this tendency to love themselves too much and who think of nothing else but themselves. And I've met quite a number of millennials, and yes, I have to admit, some of them that I've talked to tend to be too focused on themselves. But, you see, I remember when I was in college, even in my early 20s, I was just like them. I was narcissistic myself. So it may not really be a generational thing. It's probably an age thing. It's a normal human tendency to be selfish, to be conceited, to have an overblown perception of oneself. But just like my generation, which also had its share of selfishness, conceit, and that overblown perception of oneself, we grew old. And they will grow old. The selfishness is still there. And so is the conceit. Yung yabang, hindi rin naman talaga nawawala. They just take on new forms, appropriate for our age. You see, we are all sinners. We are living in the flesh. And we are all driven by passions and desires. And all these lead to death in a spiritual sense. That's why every generation, not only the millennials, not only the Gen X, not only the marshmallow babies like us, need the transformational power of the cross of Christ. Paul said in his letter to the Galatians, "And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another." When you make the decision to follow Jesus, it is a very profound, life-changing decision. It's a decision where you basically say, I am no longer master of my own life. I turn over control of my life to Jesus the Lord, who is King, and is the supreme authority in heaven and on earth. And that means our desires, our dreams and wants, our wishes and demands must be submitted to Christ. And just as Jesus submitted himself to be nailed on the cross as a sacrifice for sin, so should the desires of our flesh should be nailed on the cross as well. And now instead of following our human desires, we are now called upon to follow the Spirit of God within us. So this means there is no longer room for me. There can only be Jesus, Him, and Him alone. He reigns supreme in every aspect of our lives. As we learn to move away from me, into becoming a generation that acknowledges the Lordship of Jesus, and no one else but Him and Him alone, do keep in mind, faith matters too.